I grew up moving around a lot because of my dad's job in the military. We'd move to a new place every time he got posted to a new base. It was a great way to learn to adapt, but I always felt like I was missing something. I wanted to find a place I could call home. I decided early on that I wanted to start my own business so I could put down roots and build something that would last. After college, I got degrees in Arabic and computer science. I joined the army, and my language skills got me a job as a translator in North Africa, where I saw how important security technology is for personal and national safety. This experience shaped my post-military career. After leaving the military, I set out to open a computer and security equipment store in the outskirts of Indianapolis. I wanted to be near a busy strip mall and ideally between two electronic retail stores. On the day of searching, I found a vacant storefront with a "For Policemen" sign. As I peered into the dim, empty space, the door suddenly swung open, startling me. 2 women stepped out, laughing. The taller one said, "Sorry to scare you. We didn't expect to find a peeping Tom in broad daylight." I was caught off guard, but I chuckled and replied, "If I'd had my rifle, I might have accidentally turned you into Swiss cheese, but I'd hate to hurt 2 nice ladies." She smirked. "You must be in the military." The shorter woman stepped forward, asking if she could lease the space. I nodded and said, "Yeah, is this place available?" She introduced herself as Linda Carter, the leasing agent, and her friend Kathy Adams, a banker. I introduced myself as James, and Linda explained that they were finalizing the lease terms but hoped more tenants would help lower the loan interest rates. When I asked about the rent, Linda said it was $1,200 a month plus utilities. Kathy added that the minimum lease term was 6 months. "How about $1,000? I offered Linda $1,000 a month for a year, paid up front. She thought for a moment, and then agreed, saying that works. She turned to Kathy, noting that I might make a good bank customer. Kathy smiled and handed me her card, adding, "Let me know if you need help." Linda went to handle the paperwork, and I asked Kathy if she'd like to grab lunch. She seemed surprised but agreed, leading her to my Ford Mustang. I couldn't help noticing her raised eyebrows. "Nice car," she remarked. I smiled. "Thanks, how about you drive us somewhere nice? I've never driven a manual before." "No problem, I'll teach you. I'm an Army infantryman, and when unexpected doors opened, it often meant danger since I didn't have my rifle. I was ready to throw my pen at you." I joked, making her laugh. "Why join the Army and go to such a dangerous place?" she asked. I told her about my upbringing as the son of a U.S. Army colonel and an Algerian nurse. I explained how my parents met in Algeria before political turmoil escalated there. I grew up as an Army brat. I earned degrees in Arabic and computer science, and felt I was both patriotic and restless. I felt like the Army was the right path for me, and my language skills got me assigned as a translator. She leaned in. "Was it as exciting as I expected? Did I get shot at?" "It's on the bank," she said with a playful smile. "On the drive back." She joked. "The girls will be jealous when I pull up in this car." She teased. "Then show them a bit of leg and toss me the keys." She played along, making a theatrical exit and waving before disappearing into the bank. A few minutes later, I called her. "What time should I pick you up for dinner on Saturday?" She teased back. "Who is this? A guy gives you a ride in his Mustang and you forget him already?" James said. "I didn't recognize your voice." 7 works for me. Dress sharp. When I picked her up on Saturday, I said, "You look dazzling. All the guys at the local diner will love seeing you." She smiled and said, "If you take me there, I'll never see your battle scars." I grinned and said, "I've got reservations at Sullivan's Steakhouse for dinner." She nodded and said, "Perfect. But do we have time for wine?" "First, show me how a successful banker lives," I replied, laughing. She invited me into her cozy apartment. "I'm entry-level successful, aiming higher. I bought this place 2 years ago, but haven't invested much in renovations." I noticed her diploma from Purdue and asked her major. "Finance," she replied, smiling. Figures fit your career, she nodded. True, but my real dream is real estate development banking. Real estate projects for a few years is the best way to learn. We spent the evening talking about Kathy's college years and her plans for the future. We had dinner and talked about Kathy's college years and her plans for the future. It was a great evening, with good conversation, excellent food, and just the right amount of wine. She asked how my computer skills came into play during my military service. My first combat mission in Iraq changed everything. I began by raiding a suspect in an insurgent house and found some computers. My team was ready to destroy them, but I stopped them, insisting we take the equipment to the intelligence officer. I gave everything to the G2 officer, who just smirked and said, "What are we supposed to do with this junk? No one knows how to operate an Arabic system." I told him, "Sir, besides being an interpreter, I can handle a computer in Arabic." I also included details of weapon caches on the map. The command team quickly organized airstrikes and artillery fire while keeping everything secret to avoid tipping off spies. The Air Force struck first, and the rest of us scrambled to our positions. From then on, I worked exclusively with confiscated computers, uncovering insurgent bank accounts used to fund weapons, bribes, and salaries. She raised an eyebrow. "So you disrupted?" I was able to trace the money flow, which felt like a duty. I even found a way to transfer funds directly using my personal laptop. I moved a substantial sum into my Indianapolis bank account, ensuring that the enemy couldn't access it to cover my tracks. I quickly transferred it to a numbered Swiss account, which was safer than using Army systems thanks to clearance protocols. I didn't tell her more about that particular income source, though I added, "That's why my book is titled." I told her how I'd beaten the insurgents without leaving my desk. She laughed and teased, saying I must have hurt myself at my desk. I smirked and said, "Sorry, my scars are classified." We laughed about it on the way to a club where we spent a couple of hours dancing. When I dropped her off at her apartment, she asked if I wanted to come in. I said, "Yeah, I'd like that," and joined her for a glass of wine before leaving. I asked, "Was this date good enough for another?" She said with a smile. "Yes, but only because I need to see those scars." I promised to call her soon before I left. She hugged me and then pulled me in for a warm, lingering kiss. On our second date, we had dinner at a jazz bistro before heading to a concert during intermission. She leaned in and asked, "Are you ready to show me those war wounds?" I teased, "Nope. Maybe when we get back to your place." I'd never received a Purple Heart when I sensed doubt in her voice. I pulled up a picture on my phone showing me in uniform holding my medal. She seemed satisfied but still curious. I grabbed a small briefcase from my glove box. "No proposals tonight," I said. "That's for date 6, but here's the real deal." She opened the case and found my Purple Heart. She read aloud, "Shell fragment to the right eyelid." I pointed to the faint scar above my eye. "How'd it happen?" she asked, giggling. "I was making an omelette when a bad egg exploded. The medical report says eggshell fragment to the eye, but it still earned me a Purple Heart," I said with a laugh. We talked for hours, growing closer by the minute. Weeks later, I hired an office manager, Benny White. She was sharp, experienced, and married to a local police officer. Despite her impressive resume, her previous employer claimed she didn't fit their target market, so she was thrilled to join my team. Life seemed perfect. As Kathy and I got closer, 2 men from the CIA turned up at my office. They flashed their badges and asked to speak privately. My chest tightened as they mentioned captured insurgents complaining about an American low, their bank accounts. I stayed silent, fighting back the old anxiety creeping into my mind. They didn't accuse me outright, but their implication was clear. Then came the twist. They wanted me to work for them as a private contractor, offering $220,000 a month. They said I could get $220,000 a month, the first $500,000 of any recovered funds being mine. They said the rest would go to the CIA. They said I could get back a lot more than that. If I didn't take the job, they'd investigate my previous operations. By the end of my tour in North Africa, I'd accumulated over $1 million in Swiss accounts and another $300,000 in Indianapolis. The CIA wanted me to keep disrupting insurgent bank accounts. The only hesitation I had was Kathy. When I told her about the offer, she was stunned. $20,000 a month is too good to pass up, she finally said. So I agreed. I didn't mention the CIA's bonus program to Kathy. She needed to move out of her apartment, so I invited her to move in with me. I outfitted my home with top of the I kitted out the place with all the latest security gear, including hidden cameras, sensors, and remote monitoring capabilities, so it was fully secure. She was welcome to use all of it. I told her I'd cover the bills while she focused on her career. She was a bit unsure at first, but the convenience eventually won her over. We quickly settled into a routine that felt natural before heading off. I'm going abroad again. I've planned a schedule to balance my work in North Africa with my time in the States, 3 months there, 3 months here. I explained this to Kathy so that I can avoid burnout, and we'll have consistent time together. She seemed reassured, but I could tell she still had reservations. My first stop was a meeting at Langley with the CIA. They saw me as a hybrid. I wasn't just an asset, I wasn't a person either, I was a tool. They were pretty blunt about it. If I messed up, the deal was off. If my actions led to civilian casualties or compromised missions, the consequences would be swift and final. Those 3 months in North Africa were pretty intense at the command center. I worked really hard analyzing insurgent systems. I was working hard to give the CIA a constant edge, mapping out connections between insurgent cells, identifying hidden supply lines, and even leaving funds in certain accounts to bait enemy operatives into revealing themselves. Some days I barely slept, but it was worth it when I saw the results saving lives. Kathy and I spoke every day through FaceTime despite the 9-hour time difference. Even a short video call with her made the long days bearable. She'd tell me about her meetings at the bank and her growing portfolio of loans, while I'd share vague details of my work, leaving out anything classified to maintain my health. I joined a Marine station at the compound for morning physical training. At first, they added me, but I was still unsure. What do you make of an Army brat working for the CIA? Well, after a few weeks of running, weightlifting, and sparring with them, I became part of their group. It was a welcome break from the computer screens and intelligence reports that dominated my days. When the 3 months ended, I met with the senior CIA officer in the region to review my work. "You've exceeded our expectations," he said. Looking over the reports, I saw that the data you provided was saving lives. "Do you want to stay for another stint or head home?" I smiled. "I'm heading back to marry the most beautiful woman in India. I'll be back in 3 months, but in the meantime, I've trained your teams on what to capture during raids and created protocols for remote access from Indianapolis. I'll still be able to extract. I'll keep you posted with the intel." The officer nodded, pleased with my thoroughness. Kathy greeted me at Indianapolis International Airport with a smile that could light up a city. Despite the distance, we had grown closer. It felt like everything was falling into place. I sent her a bouquet of flowers with a note that read, "You're more beautiful than these flowers. Join me for dinner. This Saturday, you might want to pick out a new dress." The restaurant was actually the penthouse suite of the Grand Meridian Hotel. I'd arranged a romantic dinner on the balcony overlooking the city skyline. A string quartet played her favorite songs as we enjoyed a 5-course meal. The bedroom hidden from view was lined with rose petals, and I'd planned the whole evening down to the last detail. Kathy was curious about where we were going but didn't ask me any questions when the limo pulled up to the hotel. The concierge greeted us warmly and personally escorted us to the suite. Kathy was so happy she practically floated through the lobby. Passers-by turned to watch us, probably wondering if we were celebrities. Dinner was perfect, crisp champagne and a molten chocolate dessert. After a chocolate dessert and a perfect view of the skyline, I lifted a silver plate cover to reveal a small purple velvet box. Kathy gasped with emotion as she knelt before me. I opened the box and began my proposal. She whispered yes, but I gently stopped her so I could finish. I asked, "Will you be my wife?" She laughed through happy tears and said, "Our wedding was small and intimate because neither of us had large families. We flew to Charleston, South Carolina for a honeymoon filled with Southern charm, complete with horse-drawn carriages and seafood by the waterfront. When we returned, Kathy introduced me to her network of realtors and developers, a group that fascinated me with their business acumen. Balancing my three after a few months of living abroad, I was used to it by the time we celebrated our first anniversary. I asked Kathy if she knew a realtor who could help us find a house. She looked at me, confused, and asked what kind of house I had in mind. I told her it was up to her, but the total cost, including furnishings and remodeling, couldn't exceed $1 million. She was surprised, but she agreed to the terms. $1 million? I reassured her we can afford it. I've made some smart investments over the years. I wanted to make sure you married me for love, not money. She shook her head, called me a jerk, and said, "Fine, it's a cash deal." Kathy found an incredible deal, a divorcing couple looking to sell quickly while I was abroad. She oversaw the remodeling and kept me updated through FaceTime. I requested a high-grade security system with hidden cameras and microphones, explaining it was for her safety. In truth, I had received tips that insurgents were growing angrier about their stolen funds, and I couldn't afford to take chances to add another layer of security. I contacted Tom, like a private investigator recommended by Linda. I installed a grade security system with hidden cameras and microphones, explaining it was for her safety. In truth, I had received tips that insurgents were growing angrier about their stolen funds, and I couldn't afford to take chances to add another layer of security. I contacted Tom, like a private investigator recommended by Linda. I told him at our meeting that I need your help to keep an eye on my wife's activities. Install a tracker on her car and put a beacon in her phone. If there's anything suspicious, I need to know. And if there's any sign that she's being forced into anything, I need to know that too. I also wanted to protect her enemies, who might try to use her against me. Alex nodded thoughtfully. He said this would be expensive, with an upfront fee and monthly charges based on the services performed. I agreed immediately and transferred the money despite Alex's assurances. I felt uneasy, though, and wanted to ease my mind. So I decided to start my own investigation. I went through Kathy's closet, checking every shoe box, lifting the shelves and checking all the pockets in her clothes. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary at first. Then, in the hall closet, I noticed a small travel bag secured with a tiny lock. I picked it open with a paper clip and discovered a set of French lingerie, cheap clothes, and while the shoes were worn and clearly washed several times, so it was obvious she'd been meeting someone next. I checked the hidden cameras in the house and replaced their batteries to ensure everything stayed operational in my office. I noticed screwdriver marks on the top drawer of my file cabinet. Someone had rifled through my tax returns and investment information, likely preparing for a divorce. While my offshore and Swiss bank accounts were untouched, it seemed like Kathy was gathering ammunition for alimony negotiations. I checked my weapons safe, which remained locked and untouched, and decided to confront her. I invited Kathy to dinner after making reservations. I left her a voicemail and sent a text, also leaving a new dress on the table for her to wear by 5. I'll be there at 6 p.m. I had a meeting at 6 p.m. I had a quick nap, showered and dressed in my best suit at 6:15, but there was still no response from her. I checked her cell tracker, which showed her at a high-end office building near her bank. I went ahead to Olive and Finch, a popular restaurant where I reserved a secluded table. I ordered a bottle of her favorite wine and tracked her location, which remained unchanged by 7:20. I ordered soup, noticing the sympathetic looks from nearby diners as I sat alone at 7:30. My phone vibrated. It was Kathy. "Hi honey, please forgive me. James, my phone died and I couldn't get your messages," she said. "I understand. Will you come to my place for dinner? I'm still here because you said I wasn't attentive enough, and I wanted to make this night special. Are you still coming?" I asked. "Yes, James. I just finished a meeting, but I'll be there in 30 minutes. A few minutes later, Kathy arrived. She was out of breath, her hair disheveled, and her blouse wrinkled. I apologized for keeping James waiting. I told her that she had ruined the special night I had planned for us. She asked if I had eaten. I'm not hungry, but I heard they have a great triple chocolate brownie here, she said. Order that and a scotch on the rocks, I replied. Once dessert arrived, I asked casually, so how's your day? She sighed. Hectic. We had an issue with the wording on a mortgage for the shopping center. Meadow Lane. The bank thought we were mortgaging 2 buildings, but the borrowers thought it was just one. She explained. Did it take all day? No, she replied. It started in the afternoon and ran late. Who was involved in the negotiations? I inquired. Her tone shifted, and she said, Why all the questions? It was just another day at work, she said, irritated. After you didn't return my calls and texts. I was left feeling a bit embarrassed, waiting here. I think I deserve a little more than just another work day. Am I overstepping the mark? No, but I don't like being interrogated as if I'm hiding something. Are you hiding something or someone from me? No, I'm not, I replied, trying to defuse the situation. Don't be so defensive. She said okay, and then suggested a change of topic. I replied, hoping to lighten the mood. She softened, and said she would play along. I told her that I hadn't left the office, and that they had brought sandwiches, which I hate, and that it probably put me in a bad mood. I apologized for snapping at you. She said it was okay, honey, I love you, grumpy or not. I said this to reassure her that dinner was more relaxed after that as we discussed plans for the weekend. However, I still sensed she was lying about her day when Kathy went to the bathroom. I glanced at her phone and saw that it was 75% charged, which contradicted her earlier excuse about it dying at home. She immediately took a shower, which was unusual. Unless she'd been outside or meeting someone, the first day of my investigation had been revealing. I knew it was crucial to appear ignorant. Indiana doesn't allow infidelity as grounds for divorce, so I didn't need proof of cheating, only irreconcilable differences. My main goal was to protect my assets and reallocate my portfolio in Switzerland later. Kathy unexpectedly entered my office while I was reviewing my investments. I was startled and quickly shifted my focus. I was in my office, looking over my investments, when she came in. She seemed surprised, so I quickly changed the subject. What are you looking at? She asked, looking at the screen from a distance. I'm reallocating investments and trying to decide between Google and Amazon, I replied. Any suggestions? She asked. I'm not sure, I said. Why don't you take a look at this? I pointed at the screen. 3646,624, is that your money? There's no name, just numbers. I'm not sure, I said. Why don't you take a look at this? Yes, that's my Swiss bank account. It's money I made from trading goods while I was overseas. She raised an eyebrow. Why don't you transfer that money here so I can spend it? She asked. That money stays in Switzerland to avoid massive taxes. The $1 million you spent on the house and furnishings came from this account. It was my gift to you, I explained. Are there any other accounts I don't know about? I said I had one account and a lot of money in it. She asked how many accounts I had and how much money I had in them. I smiled and said, You've used your one honest answer. She got frustrated and jumped into my arms, laughing. I said, Great, keep surprising me. She said, I need a Ferrari and a bigger house. I said, Wait, honey. I plan to spend that money on us, but we need a plan. I said, We can either spend it now or triple it in 2 years. Would you rather have $10 million in 2 years or $3? $6 million now. I'll buy you a new Audi every year, and there's more to come. I did all this for you. I said, Okay, you'll get it later. The corporation is separate, so any tax problems will fall on it, not you. Kathy asked, her voice uncertain. Why are you doing all of this for me? You've been an incredible friend and business partner. You've done the heavy lifting while I stayed in the background. There's a catch, though. One day you might be contacted by Pete Stone. If that happens, do whatever he asks without discussing it with anyone, not even your husband. I promise you won't be asked to do anything illegal. It'll just be a favor. He saved my life more times than I can count. I get it, James. I understand why you're saying this, but I wish you wouldn't talk like that. It feels like bad luck. I'd rather you come back safe so we can continue working together. That's my wish too, Kathy. I just wanted to make sure you're taking care of yourself. I replied at home. Kathy spent the next week visiting a luxury apartment building owned by Mark Silver. She had a homebuilder seminar and convention, and she told me she'd be home late every night. I noticed the event materials on the kitchen table and asked about the formal dance mentioned for Saturday night. It's a big deal, she explained. It's a dress-up event, and it's best to wear your best suit or a two for the men and little black dresses for the ladies. There will be a live band and an open bar. I'll probably be home very late, it says spouses. You're invited. Would you like me to go with you? I asked. You said you needed to have more fun and that we haven't gone to a dance in ages. Kathy hesitated. You don't know anyone there and I'll be busy networking and developing business relationships. You might end up sitting alone for hours and you hate that. Without a computer, she said. Her tone was dismissive, ignoring her remark. I responded. You've asked me to change, so I'm trying to be the kind of husband you want. I informed Mr. Lick about the party and he promised to install equipment to capture audio from Kathy's purse. He also gave me a microphone disguised as a pocket square that I could activate with a subtle hand swipe. The first 2 nights of the convention went well. Kathy came home late but didn't act out of the ordinary. She skipped her usual post-work shower and snuggled up next to me. She whispered a sleepy goodnight on Saturday. I got dressed in my best suit and waited for Kathy in the living room. When she came down the stairs, she looked amazing. Her sleek black dress clung perfectly, and her hair was styled with effortless elegance. Amazing, my dear, that dress was made for you. She smiled and insisted we take my newest Corvette to the event. The table reserved by her bank offered a great view of the dance floor and catwalk. 2 couples were already seated when we arrived, and Kathy introduced me as her husband. One of the women laughed and said, Kathy, I thought you said your husband was a computer nerd. Who's this handsome guy? All eyes turned to Kathy for her response. With a tight smile, she replied, Why don't you tell them about yourself, James? Share what you do in your work abroad. I kept my tone light. I own a computer store on Main Street and spend 3 months at a time overseas working on systems for the Army. I wouldn't call that nerdy. Kathy's expression changed slightly at my gentle correction. Well, you'll always be my favorite nerd, I said, brushing it off. Now go grab us some drinks while I socialize. I made my way to the drink line, which was long enough to delay me in front of 2 realtor women chatting loudly. The taller one whispered, There she is, the most beautiful loan officer in town. Look at that. The woman in the blue dress is working overtime to secure funding for Liam's new high-rise. The shorter woman added that she's doing most of it at night. Did you see the rock on her finger? Her husband is a computer geek who's gone a lot, but maybe he doesn't mind her business development efforts. They reached the bar before I could hear more. Returning to the table, I noticed Kathy surrounded by 4 men, all circling her like wolves. I squeezed into the group, handing her a glass of wine. She looked surprised and slightly annoyed at my interruption, introducing me halfway through. She said, This is James, my husband. I shook hands with Mark Silver, who barely looked at me. Nice to meet you, Mr. Silver, I said. I hear you're the real estate man in town. He gave me a reluctant smile. Your wife mentioned you're a shrewd investor, he added. Did she? I replied, shooting Kathy a pointed look. I didn't realize she shared my investment strategies. Kathy busied herself adjusting a thread on her dress. Silver chuckled awkwardly. She only said she was impressed by the size of your portfolio. My jaw tightened. Well, I'll have to guard it. I'd better keep my financial details private. I hope she'll do the same with mine. It was nice meeting you, Mr. Silver, but I'd like to dance with my wife now. I grabbed Kathy's hand and led her to the dance floor. I whispered through clenched teeth, calm down or you'll ruin both your marriage and career. Take 3 deep breaths, wait 60 seconds, then smile. Be professional. To my surprise, she followed my advice. I didn't like how you confronted me. She admitted, don't share details about my wealth. I replied, I don't trust anyone, not even you. She was shocked. She asked, Do you really mean that I met her gaze? How often do I lie to you? How often do you lie to me? She looked stunned. I've never caught you lying, she said, avoiding the second question as we returned to the table. One of them men tapped my shoulder and asked, Mind if I dance with your wife? Sorry, but tonight is special. We won't be dancing with anyone else, I replied, holding firm. After a few more songs, I turned to Kathy and said, I'm done. Are you coming home with me or staying? She hesitated. This is my job. James, there are people I need to spend time with, she replied. It's up to you, but if you stay, figure out how to get home. I love you, but tonight I'm going home, I said, kissing her engagement ring before leaving. The next morning, I texted him to let him know Kathy was still at the Grand Meridian. She didn't get home until almost noon. She arrived in an Uber. Her dress was wrinkled, and her expression was a mix of exhaustion and forced cheerfulness. She kissed my cheek and said thank you for being my husband. Then she disappeared upstairs to shower. I wondered since when I got back to the Grand Meridian hotel room. The shower was nice and quiet, but I could still hear Kathy in the bathroom. She said she wanted coffee and toast, so I asked if she could put her favorite jam on a slice of toast. She chewed slowly before answering, I danced with Jeremy Thompson. The guy you turned down for a dance, he said you seemed nice. After that, I spoke to 20 or 30 people, making sure they knew I valued them. She didn't say whether she went back to her room, someone else's, or even where she had breakfast. I decided I'd get the truth from Mr. Lick. We met in his office at 10 midnight m. On Monday, he offered me coffee, but I said I'd have water instead. He said, If you don't mind, James, I'll outline the findings in order, starting from day 1. I nodded and used Kathy's cell phone locator to track her. She was having lunch at Mark Silver's. She went to the 14th floor, where Jeremy Thompson has his office. He's a subsidiary of Silver Real Estate Company. We don't have recordings from those meetings yet, but here's a summary of the last 3 days' findings. She told Thompson over the phone that she was disappointed in you. She said she'd rather have spent the night at the convention dancing, eating and making love. She was going to pretend to be drunk so she could avoid driving home after Thompson insulted you. She ended the call abruptly, reminding him that you're her husband and that she's only using in another call. She told Thompson, I've decided you need $3 million for the new condo, and I can get the money from James by selling him on the idea of investing. He probably has more stashed away. Thompson asked where that nerd gets all that money. She replied, If he has $3 million, that's $3 million more than you have. That's $3 million more than you have. She suggested putting off any divorce plans until she figured out how much money you control. It might be better to stay married and keep access to his funds than settle for half. She said she could fund the mall's equity stake after you left the dance. She invited Thompson to dance, but she told James she thought someone might be watching them, so this will be their only dance tonight. She said she'd book a room and call after midnight. Mr. Murray, I'm not going to replay their conversations after midnight. It's not something any husband here needs to know, but the recordings are available if you want them. I'll keep the files in case you want to reconcile, but I don't recommend listening to them unless you really have to. Let's continue surveillance. I took a deep breath before replying. Yes, continue surveillance. In 2 weeks, we'll stop. I'll listen to the recordings if I think it's necessary. Thanks, Mr. Lick, for helping me stay focused on my future back home. I closed all my IS accounts and took the tax hit as James Murray. I paid the penalties knowing I'd soon leave that identity behind. I changed the beneficiary on. I maxed out my life insurance to the Wounded Warriors Project, used my joint credit cards to buy currents and traded my Corvette for Bitcoin. I signed over power of attorney to Pete Stone, emptied my safe deposit box and moved funds from Swiss and Cayman accounts into new ones in the weapon safe. I left a box of $11. I also left $20,000 in $20 bills rigged with tear gas bait money for Kathy in case she tried anything. I also left the combination written on a note. Kathy tried convincing me to invest in Silver's M project, presenting it as a great opportunity. I told her to prepare a full analysis to keep her busy while I finalized my plans. In the meantime, I contacted a Moana realtor and secured I found a 4,000 square feet Adobe-style home with mountain views, a pool and a golf course for $3 million in cash. I felt no love for Kathy anymore, only a burning need for revenge to keep her unaware. I told Kathy I had a work trip to DC but instead flew to Tucson to finalize my new life. She didn't offer to drive me to the airport, which was unsurprising. She was probably relieved to see me leave. I opened new bank accounts in Tucson under my Pete Stone identity and transferred $4 million into them. The house was perfect, and the realtor agreed to store personal items securely, monitoring the house in Indiana via motion-activated cameras. I saw no signs of a lover visiting. Kathy was working on a shopping center proposal for me, unknowingly aiding me. When I got back to Indianapolis, Kathy was waiting for me at the airport in her Audi. She said, "Welcome home, my wonderful husband. I've missed you." Her smile was warm but seemed a little hollow. "It's been a long trip," I replied, trying to mask my indifference. I left the house early the next morning without seeing her speak to her. Mr. Like greeted me with a smile and said, "We've recorded." Kathy went to Silver's building again. She met first with Thompson and then with Silver. They discussed using your money for the mall and their projects. He said Liam, another real estate figure in their circle, is successful but strapped for cash. He needs funds to avoid defaulting on loans, which would jeopardize his empire and in turn Kathy's career. Like paused. Handing me a video, "James, this part is a bit unpleasant. You'll need to see it." Watching the footage was tough, but I forced myself through it that evening. Kathy prepared dinner and presented her prospectus. "Would you like to review my proposal tonight?" she asked, setting a glass of whiskey in front of me. "Yes," I replied, fighting interest. "Would you prefer to present it or just have me read it?" she said with a smile. "Let me get comfortable first." She went on to give me a detailed analysis, pointing out the low debt-to-equity ratios and solid net rental income. However, I knew the anchor tenant was considering closing stores, which would have a devastating impact on revenues. She also mentioned that Silver needed cash for a luxury condo project, which was a rare opportunity for us. "Great monthly cash flow and accelerated amortization," I said. "I'll have a look at the numbers tomorrow and see if I can invest more than $3 million. "That would be perfect," Kathy said, brightening up. The next morning, I called her. "Would you mind if I showed this to my overseas associates? It could help secure I thought I was being serious, but she encouraged me to think again. "Yes, please show it to them. I'm willing to risk another $2 million, which would bring the total to $5 million. Other participants could add another $5 million. She was really happy about that. I just thought it was perfect. James was just perfect. I hung up, feeling satisfied that I was making progress on my plan. I booked a hotel room in Wichita to rest during the long drive to Moana. I wanted to avoid any issues, so I hired a local security company. I got a company to keep an eye on my car overnight to make it look like I was still around. I'd already got a weapons safe just like the one in Indianapolis and arranged for it to be delivered to Pete Stone's new house with Sirius XM playing constantly in the background. The journey felt smooth and uneventful. When I got to my new home, I felt a sense of relief I hadn't felt in years. After setting up the essentials, I allowed myself a moment to enjoy the quiet. It was liberating to be so far removed from Kathy's schemes. After settling in and gathering the necessities for the house, I returned to Indianapolis a week later. Kathy greeted me warmly, and I told her I'd secure a $10 million package for myself and my business partners over the next couple of weeks. I got an LLC set up and spent another 3 weeks preparing and negotiating the supposed investment documents. This was just a ruse to stall until Liam's finances hit rock bottom. One morning before Kathy left for work, I decided to test the waters. "We're almost done with the paperwork," I told her. "We could sign as early as this week, but the money won't be in the bank until everything's finalized. I think we should talk about our future. You've been working so hard for others. It's time to focus on us, our investments, and maybe even starting a family. What do you think?" Kathy's eyes sparkled and she smiled. "I like that idea, James. It sounds wonderful. Thank you for thinking about us," she said, kissing me softly before leaving the house. I learned later that day she'd gone straight to Liam's office to share the news, celebrating with him and Thompson. Her excitement about the investment was palpable, but it only fueled my resolve to see my plan through. The following week, I signed the final papers at Silver's office. Everyone in the room congratulated each other. Thompson and Silver were smirking like they'd just won the lottery. Liam turned to me and asked when the money would be coming through. I gave him a polite smile and told him the funds would be transferred directly from my Swiss account to his bank in a single transaction. "It won't be long," I assured him. The day after I signed the papers, I left for North Africa. The transfer was supposed to happen while I was out of reach. The last trace of James Murray was a passport stamp at Indianapolis International Airport. Once back at the compound, I checked the security cameras at home. Kathy was lying in bed with Thompson. I was furious, but instead of acting rashly, I channeled my anger into controlled chaos from my tablet. I triggered the fire alarm system in the house. Sirens blared, and Kathy and Thompson scrambled out of bed. The fire department spent over an hour inspecting. The property found no cause for the alarm for the next few days. Kathy and I kept missing each other on FaceTime. Finally, when we connected, her tone was icy. "When is the money coming?" she demanded. "It's been over a week since we signed the documents." I chuckled. "The money is ready in my account, but the banks here are closed. I'll transfer it tomorrow when they open." "Anything else?" she asked, her irritation evident. "No," I replied nonchalantly. "I'm busy." "Me too," she said. "Bye," I replied curtly. That night, I staged I activated one of the fire alarms and emergency lights, switching it to strobe mode. Through a speaker in the living room, I said, "Kathy, help me. They're eliminating me. Please, Kathy, I love you." The strobe lights flickered, and I suddenly heard Kathy shouting, "They're eliminating me. Please, Kathy, I love you." Kathy's screams echoed through the house as she ran, crying hysterically. She grabbed her phone and called Thompson. "Jeremy, something's wrong. I've completely lost it. Jay was being liquidated." I heard him calling for me. It wasn't a dream, I was awake. "Please come over," she begged. Thompson sighed. "It was a dream," Kathy said. "Have a glass of wine or milk and go to bed," he said dismissively before hanging up. Kathy tried calling me, but I ignored her. I smashed James's phone into pieces, ensuring she had no way of contacting me or anyone who could explain the disappearance of her $10 million. The collapse of Silver's EMP empire was inevitable without those funds. Through the cameras, I watched her crumble. Kathy was sobbing on the living room floor. Her lifestyle, which had once been fueled by my money, was unsustainable without me. The $1 million dollhouse she clung to was becoming more of a burden than an asset. James Murray, my CIA supervisor, had frozen all records of my personnel file. He cited insurgent threats to my family as the reason. Without proof of my death, Kathy would have to wait 7 years to declare me dead legally. She didn't have access to my offshore accounts, leaving her completely stranded financially. 3 weeks later, my Marine friends helped. We draped 2 tables and a blue tarp outside the compound and staged a photo of my decapitated body. One Marine dressed as an insurgent posed holding my head, which was wrapped in a tarp with ketchup splattered around my neck. My face was dusted with I painted my lips dark blue and styled my hair with salt to make it look really dead. 2 Marines in dress uniforms knocked on Kathy's door. Thompson answered and tried to brush them off. "We've already donated to the Salvation Army," he said, trying to be casual. One Marine blocked the door with his boot. "We're here to see Mrs. Adams," he said firmly. Kathy appeared moments later, pale and trembling. "Is something wrong?" she asked. The Marine handed her the staged photo. "We believe your husband has been liquidated. This photo is our only means of identification," he explained. Kathy stared at the image before collapsing to her knees and sobbing. "No, we were going to start a family," he told me. "He loved me the night he died. Where are his remains?" she wailed. The Marine kept his voice steady. "There are 30 bodies. We were forced into a pit, and the heads were left outside the compound." Kathy was inconsolable as the Marines walked away. Thompson demanded, "Where's the $1 million? What happened to the money?" I watched the scene unfold through the camera, laughing at the absurdity of it all. Kathy's life was in ruins. Her career was over, her reputation destroyed, and her dreams of a real estate empire reduced to ashes. From the safety of my new life as Pete Stone, I enjoyed a bit of poetic justice.